Retro Hangover, supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank patrons Lyle McCarnes, Ashton Ruby, Randall Quiggle, Tony G, Stud Still Smash the Milkman, Keith Gasper, Miss Peachy, JC, Megan Caruso, Mass Keaton, Andrew LaGuarri, Ozzy Garcia, The Retro Vixen, Adam from The Good, the Bad, the Backlog, Lunchbox, aka The Disgruntled Gamer, Dischimera, Jenny E, Rick Firestone, Parallax Puddles, Soha, Dave Jackson, Matt, aka Stormageddon, Retro Overdrive, B. Ross and Van Fernal from Super Garbage Day, Raging Demon, Storm Beagle, The Emperor, Eric Guess, Nomad from the Retro Wildlands podcast, Ash Event, Alan Bingham, Ryan, Player One, Mike the Ref from Backbreaker Gaming, Darth Emick, Low5 Alex, Alt, Renner Dreaming, and Oh Me. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to the most recent episode of Retro Hangover.
And hello, retro and classic gamers. Welcome to the podcast where we shyly shimmy shield shoveling shit in Chicago. This is Retro Hangover. I'm your co-host, Chris Copleen, with special guest, Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog and a Top 3 podcast. And, as always, your host, Shane Dick Knight. Kasky!
I only have one question for the both of you, and that is, are your shovels properly steeled?
Yes, sir.
I've always had plastic ones.
Well, there's your problem right there.
Yeah. It's better for shoveling snow.
Hmm.
Like if you have a spade and you're trying to go shovel a driveway with it, I mean, that's something.
That'll just fuck up your driveway. That's what that's going to do.
Yeah.
I would not recommend it, but I mean, you could.
No, this is
Not necessarily. It depends how deep you get. I think that could be like a mental exercise. Like, gauge how deep the snow is. Do you know your driveway? Go out and take the spade and start hammering into the snow. And if you mess up your driveway, I mean...
You've gone too far. I mean, that has nothing to do with knowing your driveway. That just has to do with knowing how much snow fell. And anyway, does anybody really want to, in addition to having to drag their ass outside to shovel snow, also want to, like, play the guessing game of how far do I go with this spade until I put, like, irreparable damage into my driveway? I know I don't.
They'll figure it out.
Just buy a fucking snowblower, man.
Yeah, they'll fucking snow blow you. Anyway, welcome back to the show, Dave.
Threatening me with a good time.
Thank you for having me back. It's great to be back, like third time on here. And as always, get to experience one of life's simple pleasures, which is hearing the audio cut out when Chris is doing the intro there. So fantastic.
If it's one thing I can promise my guests, is that I can give them that.
Yeah.
the audio will cut out. That's how you know if they listen to the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's going on? What did he just do? Like, oh, well, welcome. Thank you. Great to have you here. I know you're also on the King of Games 1996. As of recording, I don't think you've been on. You'll be on one very soon. Very, very soon. I think that episode has come out by the time this episode has come out. So
yeah, there we go.
Technically, this is your fourth time in the main feed.
Yeah, we got some synergy going on. Some Dave Jackson Retro Hangover synergy.
We're here to support people named Dave this week. That's what we're up to.
Appreciate that.
We're all about it.
Yeah.
Oh, we appreciate that. Great to have you here.
Yeah.
But as we are wont to do, before we get into the game du jour, which I think you all know is Shovel Knight, that's what's on the title. That's what we've kind of inferred so far. It's not exactly a secret. Yes, we are talking about Shovel Knight, everybody. We like to talk about the games that we have been playing lately. And as tradition goes, our guest always starts this off. So, Dave, what games have you been playing lately from your backlog?
Well, from the backlog, I am playing 2 games that I know you personally will have something to say about, Chris. I'm playing, first up, Final Fantasy IV, which I am most of the way through, although I'm going to take some time and do side quests and just kind of enjoy all the awesome pixel art in the PSP version of that game. So I've been enjoying that. That's been my Steam Deck game lately, playing Final Fantasy IV. And then the other one that's been taking up a bunch of time is Lost Odyssey, which is another long game. I found myself playing 2 long RPGs at the same time because I have no self-control. So those have been the main things. And then the Elden Ring DLC comes out as we're recording this, like 1 week from today or something like that, 8 days. So I jumped back into Elden Ring, spending some time there, remembering how to play that game so that I don't get completely shit-wrecked once the DLC drops. I mean, I'm going to get shit-wrecked, but I'll put up a fight at least now. So those are the main things that have been taking up my time. Final Fantasy IV, Lost Odyssey, and a little bit of Elden Ring, getting my sea legs back.
I thought getting your shit wrecked in a Souls-like was the point.
Not necessarily the point, just something that happens along the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's not a bug though. It is a feature.
It is. It's part of the experience. It builds character.
That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
Yeah. I talked about this on the Dark Souls episode. I'm gonna sit in a corner and cry while Shane talks about his experience. And I do look forward to talking about Final Fantasy IV. I have a feeling I will be talking about that very soon.
Oh yeah, astute listeners may want to check out Tales from the Backlog in like 3 months, where they might hear something.
Just might. You will.
Yeah.
Just don't worry. They'll be there.
Yeah. Be a little coy boy about it.
Yeah. Listeners, just pay attention to Tales from the Backlog anyway.
That's true. That would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So Shane, while I'm crying because I promised I'd cry about Dark Souls, so now I can't let the listeners down. They won't hear me cry. But what have you been playing lately?
Well, first of all, I did not realize the Elden Ring DLC was that close. So I should probably actually finish that game then. That would be probably a good idea.
Maybe you shouldn't finish it. Maybe you should, because if you finish it and like watch the credits and go into New Game Plus, then you have to do all that shit again. So it might be best if you left off like halfway through or something like that, because that's what you need to go to the DLC.
Oh, well, see, actually, I take that back. I've been planning this all along. I've been playing 4D chess this entire time.
What you're doing.
Yeah. No, I mean, like at this point, I'm pretty sure I've only got the Elden Beast and like Melania left. That's it. Like I'm real close to the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just haven't actually sat down and finished it. So maybe I'll wait a little bit more and just play the DLC first instead. And they get like OP or something. And
the good news is that Elden Ring is one of those where you don't automatically go to New Game Plus after beating the final boss. You have to go like do it yourself. So you can go beat it, watch the credits, and then go do the DLC, which is nice because the older FromSoft Souls games automatically kicked you into New Game Plus.
True. Yeah. Well, I haven't been playing that, so I guess I won't talk much more about that. But let's see. What have I been playing? Been playing some D4. Still enjoying the new season there. The anniversary event's going on right now. Plus, because I clearly don't learn from my mistakes, and I'm a glutton for punishment. I have already pre-ordered the expansion, so you know how that goes. And let's see. So we got that going on. I'm actually still playing Diablo Immortal on my phone because I have a phone. It's still actually pretty good. I have been unironically enjoying myself. My Blood Knight is really fun to play, and I can pretty much dodge a lot of the real egregious like pay to win shit because I don't care about PvP leaderboards or whatever. So yeah, let's see. We got that going on. What else? What else am I doing? I feel like there's something else. Oh, of course, I haven't talked about this yet, but I was trying to find a game that I could play with my 10-year-old that would be engaging enough, but also something that we could sort of play together that is sort of an ongoing thing. So my mind obviously went immediately to MMOs, but the thing is like most of the, kid focused MMOs don't really exist anymore. Like there were a bunch of them in the like mid 2000s or so, and most of those are gone. So I did a little bit of digging and came up with Trove. And so we've been playing that every morning when he gets up at breakfast. We play some Trove while his mom gets ready, and then she takes him into school, or in this case it's summer, so she's taking him to the summer camps we got him enrolled in, under the guise of giving him a lot of different experiences, which is true, but in my mind the real reason is so that he is not around the house while I'm trying to work. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've been playing some Trove for quite a bit now. Got several hours into it, and it's a neat little MMO. It's definitely got the microtransaction crap going on, but you don't really need to engage with any of that. And it's like a distilled like version of the MMO formula. So it's a little bit easier to understand. I'm still helping him try to wrap his head around like a lot of the different game mechanics that are present, because there's a whole bunch of different stuff like gear upgrading, socketing gems, like a totally separate like skill tree thingy that requires different like currency that you get from grinding and whatever. And there's a whole bunch of different like things, moving parts, that he's having a hard time sort of grasping all of that. So I've been helping him sort of wrap his head around it. But yeah, so we've been enjoying that one, and I think that's pretty much it for me. I think it's kind of just those three right now. Chris, what do you got going on?
You know what? I always try to think about what I talked about last time. I never truly can. So I'm just going to spitball this and just say I beat Secret of Evermore for the RHRC chat, which was, I don't think I talked about that last time. A lot of people hate that game, apparently. They don't like it. I thought it was fine. But go to the RHRC chat and check that out, because this month, this comes out like right before the end of the month of June. We're playing a fighting game. I know Dave's excited. We are playing Garou Mark of the Wolves. So if you want to play that, put in a review and nominate the game for next month. That should be fine. By the way, the topic for next month will be coming out soon. So if you want to go play Garou Mark of the Wolves and leave a review, you are more than welcome to. I think the topic's going to be quite good because I get to nominate it. So it's going to be the best topic of all time. I've also played some Saturn games. I'm not going to talk about that. There is IO Saturnalia, so it's going in chronological order. You can just assume I'm playing that. Making marginal advances in Eiyuden Chronicles, unfortunately, because it feels like I'm doing everything for content, but not Eiyuden, which means it's getting the least amount of attention, which means it might be a very special game for me when it's all said and done, or I may not remember any of it, so I can say it's special. There's also that. And Resident Evil 3. I've been playing some Resident Evil 3. Sure is a game. Sure is a game.
Of all the games, it is one.
It is definitely one. It reminds me that, I'm starting to sympathize with the people that hate tank controls. I think I'm starting to become on their side.
Join us.
It's so well implemented in so many other times, but Resident Evil 3 is like, nope. You forgot. Yeah, I've been reminded. Not going to get too much into that, though. That my thoughts might be revealed sometime within the next year or so. So I'm going to leave that to the side. But that's all I've been doing. It's time to start talking about our game du jour, which stars a blue-horned armored man with carrying a shovel. And at least he's not asking for donations. It is Shovel Knight, and we are ready for some brief history here from the one, the only Shane Koski. Are you feeling blue, my friend?
Dabba dee dabba die. Yes.
Okay, well, relieve yourself, and then when you get back, you can talk about the brief history and the brief history of Shovel Knight. So, Shane, are you good?
That's a complicated question, Chris, but I will read this brief history.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And here's your brief history of Shovel Knight.
Crowdfunding. Depending on your personal experience, this word could draw a mixed reaction of sorts, especially if the site Kickstarter is brought up. Yes, the site that has become a way for so many projects to get off the ground, both successful and scams, was not always a prime hub to get new video games off the ground. In fact, the concept of crowdfunding a brand new game, through independent studios or otherwise, was once a foreign concept, especially in 2013. Today, many may point to the dawn of the video game Kickstarter era with the infamous Mighty Number 9, the mostly well-executed blood-stained Ritual of the Night, or the largely disappointing Shenmue 3. But there will also be those that may point to today's game, Shovel Knight, for being the most prominent example of ushering in crowdfunding a small, independently developed game towards completion and massive success. In 2011, Yacht Club Games was founded. It was founded by the former director of Way Forward, Sean Velasco, and would look to establish itself as another independent gaming studio. Early work on their debut game would involve looking to early NES titles for inspiration. The game that really got the ball moving towards what would be the game's final design was Zelda 2 and Link's sword-thrusting mechanic. This idea would branch out into discussing other games that their new title could draw inspiration from. NES classics such as Castlevania, DuckTales, Super Mario Bros., and Mega Man became main sources to draw from, as well as another game that had just come out around that time, Dark Souls, while modern, unashamedly used older titles for inspiration. Yacht Club had initially started reversing an NES trope and having a princess be the main character of the game, before changing the character to the Shovel Knight that we all know and love today, and also changing the gender of the character that needed to be rescued, Shield Knight, from a man to a woman. To fit in with the NES motif, Yacht Club would also stay as close to the Nintendo Entertainment System's color palette as possible, including its sprite count, as well as using chiptune music for its score. They decided to announce Shovel Knight on March 17th of 2013 alongside a Kickstarter campaign. Kickstarter had been backing games for a few years up until this point, with a few successful campaigns. Most famously, at that point, was Broken Age, a game that I backed a year prior, which managed to raise almost $3.5 million towards game creation, and Project Eternity by Obsidian Entertainment the previous October, which raked in almost $4 million. A goal of $75,000 was set, and when the campaign ended, it managed to raise just over $311,000. Release was slated for shortly after the campaign ended in late 2013, but delays would slide the game back before landing it in mid-2014. Thus, on June 26, 2014, Shovel Knight would release on the Nintendo 3DS and Wii U eShops, as well as PC in North America. The rest of the world also saw release on that day, but only for personal computers. Critics reviewed the game highly, with most reviewers awarding it in the 90th percentile according to Metacritic. Critics found the game fresh and innovative, despite being so heavily influenced by games of the past. It would be a runner-up for numerous Game of the Year awards, including winning Best Independent Game by the Game Awards, Best Wii U and 3DS eShop Game by Nintendo Life, and Best Music, Platformer, and Best Overall 3DS Game by IGN. Shovel Knight also sold very well, especially for a small studio, going on to sell over 400,000 copies before the end of the year. Eventually, the game would be released to all current platforms up to the Nintendo Switch version in 2017. With its wide release and highly positive reception, Shovel Knight would go on to sell approximately 3 million total units worldwide. Following years, Shovel Knight would continue to receive free DLC for consumers, including campaigns with various bosses from the title, culminating in the game's final, complete name, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, in 2019. There would also be console-specific DLC, such as a boss fight against Kratos in the PS4 version, as well as one against the Battletoads on the Xbox One. Additional games in the series have also been created, such as 2021's Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon and 2022's Shovel Knight Dig. The success of the game also earned appearances and homage in a smattering of indie games, much too many to list here. And that is your brief history of Shovel Knight.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Thank you for struggling through that brief history I haphazardly put together and poorly wrote. Hopefully we didn't make too many mistakes and our listeners won't flame spray us on YouTube. That seems to be somewhat of a trend from time to time, but that is okay. Any comments here from either of you about the brief history? Anything really stick out? I know this is a more recent game. It just manages to break that 10-year threshold to qualify for the show. So I'm pretty sure all of us lived through it and kind of experienced the phenomenon that was Shovel Knight.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to be saying this more and more often as time goes on now, but I am still mildly shocked that this game is already old enough for us to be talking about. Because I do remember when it came out, and I'm just like, oh, it's been 10 years, huh? Wow.
Sure has. How about yourself, Dave?
I did not hear about this when it came out. I probably first heard about this in 2018 or so. It's a story I tell often when I do my personal histories on my show. I got a Switch in 2018 and I Googled best Switch games, and Shovel Knight was on a bunch of those lists, and that's when I first learned about it. Even though in 2014 I had a Wii U, I did not have a lot of games to play for it. I think it was the eShop. I never bought anything on the Wii U eShop. I would always browse it and like hover over the checkout button on a bunch of stuff, but never bought anything on there. So that's probably why I didn't, but I was one of the, 2 or 3 dozen Wii U owners that would have liked to play Shovel Knight back then, but I just never heard about it. This is a Switch game for me. That's when it first came into my life.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And we're right into personal experiences. And I think I'll take this one next here with my personal experience. And, it's funny you say you don't buy it on the eShop. And I didn't either. I was actually very slow to pick up on a lot of eShop titles, even with a Wii U. I think the most I got was when some virtual console titles, because they were like 30 cents to celebrate the 30th anniversary for the Famicom or whatever. I'm like, hell yeah, 30 cents. I'm not going to complain about that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I was a physical collector, and I didn't really hear about Shovel Knight. I think it was kind of one of those indie games, and I wasn't skeptical of indie games, but it felt like a lot were coming out and all of them were special. So it's kind of like, okay, are they really special or what's the deal here? Now here we are 10 years later, and it feels like there's 5 new special indie games coming out every day. And a lot of them are special. I'm not trying to shit on indies. Go buy your indies. Go support your indies. Absolutely. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Probably better than your AAA games. Little bit of a break there. Yeah. Support your indies. But the reason I got into it was because they came out with a physical version in 2015 for the Wii U. And as soon as I heard that was coming out, I rushed over to my local GameStop. I pre-ordered it. And as soon as that physical copy came out, I went and got it. I think I was playing within a few days. That's when I actually played the games that I bought almost immediately. I know that feels like forever ago, but that's my experience with it. I think I heard from I'm not going to say anything slanderous, or I don't know if it's slanderous or accusatory towards the one Gerard the Completionist, but I think I was influenced by his channel at the time because I was very much a watcher of the Completionist YouTube channel. I definitely enjoyed it. So there probably, I don't remember it specifically, but if I'm watching this channel pretty regularly, and he was very much in somewhat of a marketing campaign with Yacht Club, that some of that had to rub off at least a little bit. I'm glad that I did get that influence because, I mean, we're going to find out. I've already probably spoiled whether or not this game is held up today, especially if you've been in the RHRC chat. Yeah, it was a game that I was hooked to, and I think I beat it really quickly. I really enjoyed it back then. Did I enjoy it today? Stay to the end of the episode. We'll find out. Shane.
Uh-huh.
Your personal experience with the game.
Okay, I thought it sounded like you had more to say there. I don't know. It was a weird pause. Let's see. My personal experience. So I'm trying to remember exactly when I started playing this. It wasn't like, okay, first of all, I did not back this, so I wasn't there from the very beginning or anything. I will say I find it strange, and I guess maybe it's because I'm so used to seeing like these big blowout numbers on Kickstarter where it's like, we asked for $100,000 and we got 6 million. So it was actually a little surprising to me to see like what they asked for and then what they got, because the numbers just seem so like low. But I guess at the time that probably makes sense. But I want to say, so I own this on my 3DS. I bought it from the eShop and I still have it on my 3DS, and it's been updated with all those free DLC updates. So, and now I have the treasure trove version as well with all the cool bells and whistles, which, by the way, Yacht Club Games is the fucking MVP for doing that. Like, putting out so much additional DLC for no charge is just awesome.
Yeah, it's insane.
But at any rate,
yeah,
I want to say I probably got it around 2015, 2016. That feels about right. I'm trying to think of like where I was and what life was like around that time. And I feel like that sounds like the right time that I would have gotten this. So I want to say it was around there. And I fired it up today to look at my save file. I have not 100%ed it, but I am damn close. I've got all the cool stuff. I think I'm missing some of the music sheets, but I think that's it. And I had about 16 hours in the main campaign on that save file. So that was most of my personal experience. I haven't played it on any of the other platforms. I've only ever had it on my 3DS. I mean, spoilers, I guess, maybe, but I really enjoyed my time with it. So I got sucked into it for sure for that like 15 or 16 hours.
Yeah, definitely some similar personal experiences here. I could imagine why. I think the relative recency of it is going to have similar feelings. This was a game that was universally praised. So yeah, it easily explains why a lot of our stories are relatively the same one way or another, at least when we started playing it. And that's where we're going to get into eventually when we talk about gameplay. But for now, we're going to talk about this game's plot and its story. So Shane, you are usually a better and more eloquent talker than I can be when describing these things, because I just sort of ramble. What's the plot when it comes to Shovel Knight? What are we trying to do?
I make the fancy mouth words. Yeah.
You're good with your mouth.
Yeah. God, you threw me off with that one. All right, so let's see the plot. Yeah. So Shovel Knight, back in a time when the world was wild and there were adventurers abound, Shovel Knight and his steadfast partner Shield Knight were very renowned, successful adventurers amongst all of those, and they were exploring the Tower of Fate one day, and an amulet curses Shield Knight and leaves Shovel Knight stranded outside of the tower, which then becomes magically sealed. Shovel Knight, having just lost his stalwart companion, partner in crime, as you will, he grieves and gives up adventuring completely for a simple farm life and puts that shovel to perhaps more agricultural and practical use. But with his absence, and ostensibly the Shield Knight's absence as well, evil grows in that vacuum that they left behind, and we end up with the Enchantress and all of her cronies, the Order of No Quarter, which is a fucking fantastic name, by the way.
That could be a metal band's name.
It could, yeah. And they're all, it's a diverse array of different knights. They are very iconic. They definitely stand apart from one another. They all got their own, villainous aesthetic going on. But at any rate, this crew kind of takes over and unseals the Tower of Fate. As far as I recall, is kind of using it as like a home base. And so Shovel Knight's like, well, that shit's not going to stand. I guess I'm coming out of retirement. And he begins his journey anew to basically battle his way through all of the knights, find his way to the Enchantress, and find out if he can save his beloved partner, the Shield Knight.
So we'll kick it over to Dave. I know we've kept you. I feel like we've kept you very silent here for the first part of this episode,
holding me down.
Yeah, definitely on purpose. He can't be good with his mouth, unlike Shane. But we'll find out. We already know he's been on the show a couple times. So, Dave, what's your thoughts on the plot and writing here in Shovel Knight?
The plot's simple. I mean, like, if you've never played before, from what Shane just said, you can guess how the plot goes for the most part, in the style of like the type of game that it is and the type of game that it is referring back to, from the NES days, the storytelling that would take place in a platformer from back then. So you can kind of guess, like the plot's fine. It is what it is. There are little things about the way that the story is told that I think like give you just a little bit extra. Like, this is not a game that's going to have someone talk to you for 5 minutes straight ever, but you will have short little conversations with the Order of No Quarter knights when you do their boss fights. Everybody knows each other. So like those knights, they know Shovel Knight, and they talk, they have a little back and forth, then they fight, yada, yada, yada. Also, in between levels, like after you beat a boss, there's always a scene where Shovel Knight is outside by the campfire, sleeping. And sometimes you'll have these little dream sequences where Shield Knight is falling from the sky, and there's a bunch of enemies. You have to fight these enemies. Eventually, Shield Knight will fall down from the sky, and you have to jump up and catch her. And this happens, and those scenes get more and more intense as the story goes along. So a little like characterization for Shovel Knight along the path, that like he feels bad that he wasn't able to rescue her before, that she's been taken. So that's simple. And those campfire dream sequences are like 30 seconds long, and there's like 4 of them in the whole game. But those little things are nice for giving a little bit of characterization to your character as you go through. Cause I don't know, 8 to 10 hour like campaign, depending on how good you are. It is not like a super short game. So having those little bits of story flavor along the way are really good, I think.
Yeah, and I do really like the dynamic between the Order of No Quarter and Shovel Knight. They all just kind of have this like I wouldn't say vague, but this like pervasive like sort of aura of just like Shovel Knight rolls up and they're all just like, "Oh, it's you, bitch." Like that's basically how it feels for like every single one of them.
Yeah, it's great dynamic. It kind of reminds me of what Mega Man did with some of the X titles. And you already know that they borrowed some elements from Mega Man. That's definitely evident in terms of a lot of things when it comes to Shovel Knight. But definitely the banter between the bosses and Shovel Knight is very reminiscent of some of the X games just around this time. There's a lot of that in the PSP version of Mega Man X. You get that banter. But that's just what's cool. It fills out the world. It's not too short. It's not overly complicated. It's not trying to fill you with just a ton of lore, because that's not the kind of game that this is. Mm-hmm. But there is lore to it if you want to look for it. but it's not required at all. I do appreciate those little campfire scenes afterwards. I love elements of storytelling that isn't expressed through dialogue, where you can show and not tell. And these are the things that you see through Shovel Knight. Even though the aesthetic that presents itself with Shovel Knight being a little bit more goofy, being like high on the levity, and just being more of this more nostalgic and kind of, happy, upbeat kind of environment. It's not very dark or heavy in any sort of way whatsoever. And then you get into these scenes with the campfires, and there is an emotional tone to it that you can feel just by the way it's presented and the way it's expressed. And striking that kind of balance, especially with the kind of graphical design that they chose to use, is, that's a really fine line to walk. And I think they pulled it off very, very well, especially just with the lines of dialogue. This is a really, really well thought out game in terms of how the plot is delivered, because you can really take it any way you want to. You can completely dismiss it if you want to, but it's not meant to be dismissed. But like the gameplay is so strong, which we'll get into. I don't know, we're quite there yet, but it's something that you don't necessarily need to take into account if you're someone who just wants to relive nostalgia of the NES days.
Yeah. I will also say that like the story of like the main campaign, Shovel of Hope, which I think is what we're going to focus the most on, if not entirely for like the rest of the episode, that story is pretty straightforward. Again, you can guess what's going to happen just from what Shane talked about, but the other expansions do tell their own stories, and especially the one with Spectre Knight was pretty good. I mean, it uses the same type of storytelling, short little dialogue exchanges, very short little cutscenes, but it tells the backstory for one of the bosses that you fight, one of the Order of No Quarter Knights, and the things that happen in that do get into a little bit more like tragedy and stuff like that. So there is storytelling being done within like these very strict limitations for the way they do storytelling that they chose for the game.
Yeah, and I will also say that, because we haven't really touched on it at all, but the town that sort of acts as your central hub, I also appreciate the amount of characterization that goes into essentially what can be a lot of just throwaway NPCs. You can tell that like a lot of care went into, well, like all aspects of this game, frankly, but like having them have their own little dialogue quips, and the more important NPCs are like the merchants or upgrade folks or what have you. Like they're fleshed out a little bit more, but not only that, but I think that, and this kind of just dovetails a little bit into presentation and what have you, but I think that making them all very distinct, much like the Order of No Quarter, goes a long way to keeping more of this game memorable than not. They're not just like your random shop NPC number 5 or whatever, like they all have very fairly distinct personalities.
Yeah, like when you go talk to that whale and you get the juice, like that entire scene is just
yeah,
amazing. It shouldn't be as good as it is. I don't know why I love it so much, but it is a lot of fun. And that's the other thing too, is even though I was talking about the emotional toll, just the setting and atmosphere is just fun.
Yeah.
It's just very lighthearted. Good
sense of humor.
Very much so. Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Without feeling like it's trying too hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. So yeah, 100% credit on the plot and writing, but I don't think that's what most people are going to think about when it comes to Shovel Knight. But what most people come to for Shovel Knight is definitely the gameplay. I'm going to go over what kind of game this is really quick in case you're not sure. Then I'm going to turn it right back over to Dave. The gameplay it's what you imagine an NES game would be. You are Shovel Knight. You have a shovel. That is your primary means of attack. You can swipe your shovel. You can also do the DuckTales kind of pogo stick move where you jump up in the air and you press down and attack, and you're able to jump on the enemy and continue to bounce. That's really the core mechanic of this game. You move left to right or right to left, depending on the situation and the level. There are obstacles that you need to utilize and get used to in order to progress through. At the end of each level, you have a boss fight. You get new abilities that you purchase, and those abilities allow you to access new areas. No, it's not a Metroidvania. No, don't even think it. No.
It's not.
Not. Okay. Glad we clarified that. That's what it is. There's a lot of NES elements, and it's a very NES game. And like I said, you already get upgrades. It improves your attack, improves your armor, improves your life. So you could say light RPG elements. I'm not going to go there because then every game has RPG elements and just makes the word meaningless. Anyway, moving on from that, outside of the description that we have with Shovel Knight, Dave, what's your thoughts? We're going to get into the meat here. Let's talk about this game's gameplay.
Yeah, this game is an absolute blast to play. Like you said, it is what you remember those older games playing like, depending on what those games are. Now, for me personally, interestingly, well, you guys know me, so maybe you could have guessed, but I did not play any of the games that this game cites as like primary influences before playing Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight, the gameplay was so good that it inspired me to go then play DuckTales and Zelda 2 and some Mega Man games and stuff like that. That is how good I think this gameplay is. That it was like, oh, Zelda 2 inspired this game? Well, I should probably make time to play Zelda 2 now. So that's what I think of this game's gameplay. There's two main things. I don't want to like go through a whole big spiel about it. Two main things that I think like set this apart from the games, a lot of games that inspired this, and other games that might be like trying to do this similar thing in the modern day. The first thing that I will talk about is the way this game tutorializes is like incredibly, incredibly good. Every single level has a gimmick to it. Just the way that, you know, a Mega Man level will have like a thing. You got to figure out what the level's doing so you can make it through the level. And you fight the enemies along the way and collect your treasure and stuff like that. But this game just, you know how Mario, Super Mario Brothers gets all the credit, Super Mario World, for having like the best first level tutorializing. Like if someone's never played a game like this before, the game just knows what you're thinking and it will teach you slowly. So there's this one example that I always use to talk about the tutorializing in this game, and it is the Mole Knight level, the lava level, which has this gimmick of lava that you cannot jump in because it's lava. But what you can do is you can bounce on green slime balls in the level. And so they started out, they have a little green thing that you jump on and you bounce. You're like, oh, green stuff is bouncy. Okay, cool. And then slime balls fall from the floor onto the lava, and that makes lava safe to jump on. And then they teach you can hit the slime balls with your shovel, and that will turn lava elsewhere in the level safe to bounce on, and so on and so on and so on. They just keep increasing the complexity because this game's not easy. It can be quite a difficult game, I thought, at certain points, especially like the later half of the game. It's tough. But the way that they teach you how all of these things work, you'll never get to like a screen and be like, I don't know what they want from me here. You know, that's the first thing about the gameplay, is that like it's smooth, it's responsive, it's difficult, but they teach you how everything works so well that like you just into the next room, you're like, got it. I know what I need to do. Now I just need to execute on that. And I think that that's really good.
Yeah,
agreed. 100%. Yeah, and actually that even goes back to literally the very first level. Just as a quick refresher, I fired up a brand new save file on my 3DS and played through until I got to the village. So not long, just basically through the first part, just to kind of get myself reacquainted. And I'm glad that I did, because I wouldn't have remembered to even talk about this part. But the introductory level is so well crafted to teach you how to play the game without telling you a damn thing. And I appreciate that so much. Like it goes back to what Chris said earlier about showing, not telling. And it's absolutely something we've brought up before, because if you've listened to us or any other gaming media, honestly, the chances are pretty high that you've heard that at least once before, because it's a big deal. It being an interactive medium, showing and having the player actually do a thing to teach them how to do it is so much more effective than having this like text dump of like, all right, so when you press this button, this is going to happen, and then this, and also this, because most people don't learn well that way anyway. And you're really doing the medium a disservice by taking an interactive platform and reducing it to just a text crawl, right? So this does it extremely well, and it does in that sort of like gradual increase. It builds upon itself, so it'll teach you the very basics first, and then once you've kind of got a handle on that, it'll bring like one new thing in, and then it'll show you like how to deal with that. And sometimes it'll leave you in a position where it doesn't explain anything at all. It just presents you with something, and it's not maybe immediately obvious, but it's also not that difficult to sort of suss out what it is that they're trying to get you to do. Like the first time they give you a spot where you can hit a wall to find like a secret area, it's incredibly obvious that it's there, and they make it so that it's almost impossible to miss. But there's nothing like telling you that. It's not like there's a sign with an arrow pointing like, hey, you should hit this wall. It's just there. So ostensibly someone could totally miss that. And I think that's okay, because there's this like level of trust almost in the player that the developers have, in that we trust you to be intelligent enough as a player to figure these things out with what we've given you. Like, we're not here to hold your hand. And I think that's like the perfect way to go about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Going to echo everything that both of you said, obviously, because I think the gameplay here is fantastic. But one of the things I deeply appreciate about Shovel Knight is that this game can be as easy or as challenging. I don't want to say difficult. I more want to stress the word challenging as you want it to be. Are there difficult parts in this game? Yeah, sure. I think once you get to Propeller Knight stage, that's when the difficulty kind of cranks up a little bit, and it kind of maintains that difficulty throughout the game. But one of the things that's fantastic about it is that it starts out at a difficulty level that I think is very accessible to everybody. And throughout the game, you have the ability to find and purchase abilities that will make the game easier. But typically for the people who know where all these things are, you don't necessarily need them. You're just using them to make the gameplay easier, but it's also not exceptionally hard to find these abilities. And this is something that I've seen, for example, in Sea of Stars that kind of stuck in my craw, which is the game starts out and says, okay, here's all these accessories that will make the game easier, and you all have them from the beginning. Have a good time. I'm more of the mentality of ease the player in and then make them earn the abilities that make the game easier. And if they want to use them, let them use them. But if they don't want to use them, they don't have to. Not throwing shade at Sea of Stars. I understand accessibility issues, all those things like that, and they make it all available to people at the beginning. But it almost feels like, from an old school gamer perspective, which is something more that I have, it feels like I'm getting rewards that are not earned. Where in Shovel Knight, everything feels earned. Every single time you get a new ability, it feels earned. And then when you find areas to get other abilities, you know that you need to use those abilities, which makes earning those abilities even more rewarding. And so when you get to the end of the game and you're learning these more abilities, not that you need to, I'm pretty sure you can complete this entire game without finding a new ability, a new armor upgrade, new anything. I think you can do that. It's just going to be more challenging. That's an option. You can take that option. You can play this game however you really want to play it and fit it to your skill level. And I think this does it in such a good way that if you're having problems with it, it's mostly because you're not applying yourself in the way that you really should. It is one of those games that if you are struggling, it really is your fault. Unless you're just really bad at platformers, which, hey, I mean, happens. But it's just one of those cases that if you're dying, like, it's just, hey, get used to it a little bit more, maybe find that ability, maybe grind for more gold, get that upgrade in town, get more health, get more magic, get whatever you need, and you're good to go.
Are you saying that people should get good, Chris?
Dude, Chris, you hit it on the head, man. Like, the game gives you a bunch of ways to make the game easier for yourself, but you have to take a little bit of like initiative to go get those. That being said, the first two of those like special items that you get the fire rod that does a long distance attack, which is good because the shovel is a very short range weapon. And then The other one, the next one you get is the phase locket, which literally makes you invincible for like 5 seconds. So very early on in the game, you have the opportunity to get this like God mode thing. It doesn't use a ton of your magic points, actually. Like you can use it a lot throughout the levels if you want to. You can use it in boss fights. It does not matter. The only thing it won't save you from, I think, is bottomless pits. I don't remember if you can walk on spikes. You might or might not be able to. Everything else, though, will not hurt you. That's kind of like carrying the easy mode in your pocket. But you either have to go find the phase locket by exploring in the levels, or this is another thing, like the game, a nice thing it does for you is if you miss those items in the levels, you can buy them later in town. They'll just be a little bit more expensive if you don't find them in the level themselves. But they do give you the tools. And then the other tools they give you are like, they have more specific use cases, we'll say, but they give you that easy mode thing really early on. And I use the phase locket all the time. Like a lot of these boss fights can be pretty challenging. So if I find myself overwhelmed or there's an attack that I just can't figure out how to dodge, I'll just hit that phase locket, go get a few hits in and then back off and, wait for the next attack, stuff like that. I had written in the notes here that I think Shovel Knight is like a shining example of difficulty done right. And I have like 60 reasons why I think that's the case, but this is a good starting point. Like you create your own difficulty basically. Also in the levels, very similar to like Mario games, there will often be like multiple paths through a screen, like an upper and lower path. And one of them will be easier than the other one, but the harder one will have more treasure. It will have enemies. If you kill enemies, you get treasure, stuff like that. So again, you want to go down and get more money so you can buy more upgrades, do all that stuff. Go through the harder versions of those. Break the checkpoints if you want to. Make the levels that much more difficult for yourself. But you don't have to. You don't have to do any of that. You can make this game as easy as you can.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and add on to that the other thing that I don't think we've mentioned yet, and it's actually funny, I honestly, I didn't realize that they had taken inspiration from Dark Souls, but it absolutely makes sense. But in a way, it's interesting because the death mechanic in this game is very similar to Dark Souls in that when you die, it presents you with a risk-reward scenario where it's like, if you die, 3 little treasure bags will pop out wherever you died, and they will each contain an equal amount of a portion of the money that you had collected up until that point. And so when you respawn at whatever the previous checkpoint was at, assuming that you didn't break them for extra cash because you greedy, you end up going back to where you died last. And much like Dark Souls, where it absolutely can be a risk reward, like contemplation of like, okay, do I try to get this or do I not? Your treasure bags are hovering where you died. And a lot of the times you probably died because you fell down a hole.
Yeah.
that happens a lot. And so if that is the case, your little treasure bags are going to be hovering precipitously over a bottomless pit. And then you have to get there and wonder, all right, do I try to get this money back and recoup what I lost? Or do I let it go? Because there's a chance that I will try to grab this stuff that I lost and then die again. And if you miss that stuff and then die, it's gone. You lost it. And so that's where it's very similar to Dark Souls, in that if you try to recover the souls that you had lost the first time you died and you get your ass walloped again before you can successfully retrieve them, they are gone for good. And so there have definitely been times in my playthrough of Shovel Knight where I was like, all right, I'm going to try to get this back. And then I make the jump and fail miserably, or somebody knocks me back into the pit again. And I'm like, well, that's all gone now. I like that because it presents you with that choice. It's like, okay, well, you can try to, you can roll the dice. You can try to take this risk and see if you can recuperate what you lost, or just take the safe route and just move on and leave it behind.
Yeah. And unlike the Souls games, in Shovel Knight, you only lose like, I think it's like 20% of your money or something like that. So it might actually be worth your while to just skip it. If it's in too dangerous a spot, fuck it. Just go, leave it. You'll be fine. Whereas in a From Software game, you would be much more incentivized to like really put yourself in harm's way to get back, 20,000 souls or whatever like that. So in this, again, it's another friendly thing where they're like, here's this risk reward. Sometimes it's not going to be worth it, and that's fine. Just keep moving on. You'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can always go back and get gems pretty easily. It's not hard to recoup any of your losses.
Yeah.
It's almost more of a point of pride. Like you die and you gotta like, they're not getting my fucking money. I'm gonna get all this shit back. I'll show them. And sometimes you can't, but I definitely try and make an ass of myself. One of the things that I do want to point out with how this is executed, and I think this came up because this game was in our RHRC, our Retro Hangover review crew for the month of December. Some people were experiencing difficulties who aren't used to platformers. And one of the things that actually struck me in terms of how these old games kind of are, this isn't really an old game, this is a new old game, it's designed after the old games, is that the real enemy on these stages, which we haven't mentioned, are designed kind of like Mario 3 or Super Mario World, which is really cool, as opposed to like more of the Mega Man design, or if they went straight Zelda 2, that would have been a nightmare. Like wandering through a field, they have like this grid where you go to level. Anyway, the stages are more of the enemy than the actual boss fights. I didn't think that the boss fights were all too terribly difficult. Like the patterns are pretty easy to recognize. They repeat pretty often. I think that like even if you're average at action platformers, you'll be able, especially NES action platformers, if you're having trouble with bosses whatsoever, you're going to be able to get past them after maybe 2 or 3 tries maximum. They are not difficult. Where the skill lies in is manipulating your abilities throughout these stages themselves. So as Shane said, like you're going to fall down a pit a lot. And that's because a lot of the platforming obstacles are learning how to appropriately apply your pogo stick ability, learning how to jump on enemies to get across pits, or learning how to manipulate items to get across pits. Like there's a couple levels where you have that platform that barfs out rainbows.
Yeah.
And yeah, which is great. The longer you sit on it, it'll go down. So you have to jump up and raise it, and then you hit it. It won't go down. It'll create a platform that you can go across and run on it. But that's like the majority of your challenge. And enemy management on top of that. Of course, you have to be considerate of where the enemy placement is. And this game, as we've pointed out in terms of its difficulty curve, it doesn't throw everything at you all at once. It gradually introduces you to all the concepts. So when it puts it all together in the final stages, these aren't concepts or things you haven't seen before. It's just now you have to think, okay, I've done this before. It almost gives you the confidence that you can do it while slightly cranking it up. Not too much to the point where you tell yourself this is impossible and throw it on your controller and walk away. It instills enough confidence that you can be like, yeah, I should be able to do this. I've done this before, just a little bit more. And that's when you know that game, like level design is top tier, is when you come back and you tell yourself, you know, you can do it, and you struggle through it repeatedly. And it doesn't feel frustrating. You're doing it out of an obligation. You're doing it because you fucking want to.
Yeah.
And that's what Shovel Knight does.
Yeah. I would say that like you get to those challenges, and you're right. The platforming challenges by and large are harder than the bosses. But when you get to a difficult platforming challenge, the room you're in right now is like only slightly harder than the room you just did. So you know how to do it. It's a little bit more complicated, but you've just done something very similar. So you have the confidence that like, okay, there's a new complication. Like maybe I did the platforming challenge in the last room, and now in this room, there's a mage enemy that's shooting fireballs. And I just have one extra thing I have to keep in mind as I go across this room. But it's not that different from what you just did. So you know that you can do it. And then as you go, they get tough. Like I'm not great at platforming games. but they do ramp up the challenge. One thing I will say, which is super helpful, especially if you have played DuckTales, in Shovel Knight, the pogo like hitbox on your shovel is super generous. You do not have to strike things like right in the center. You can be like just pretty close to it and it'll register a hit, and you can pogo forever. All of that stuff it's pretty forgiving in like those little edge areas where they're like, we built this challenging room, but we have all of these other things here that are going to help you get across this. And, you know, every time you know what, I'm going to say a blanket statement. I don't feel like I ever died in a platforming thing in Shovel Knight and was like, that's bullshit. I hit that thing. Why did I die? Like, I don't think that ever happens in this game. And it's because I think when they had those little decisions where they're like, how wide are we going to make the hitbox for the shovel? They're like, let's just be generous with that. That's not the challenge to like hit it at the perfect angle. The challenge is to like do the sequence of things, you know? And I really respect that design philosophy here.
Oh, yeah. Anything to add, Shane?
You know, I don't think so. I feel like we've probably covered it pretty well. You know, what I find funny is that there are times where you think that we're just going to go on and on and on about a game because we're like so into it, and then we don't, because we're just like, yeah, it's good, man. Like, what do you want from us?
Yeah. Just to cap it off before we move into the next section, it's the way you remember NES games playing until you go back.
Yeah, better.
Yeah, until you go back and you play the NES game that you remember playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's really fucking good, y'all. So let's move into the visual presentation and how this game looks. I'm going to keep it with me. I'm going to say I'm actually more impressed now, because before I looked into this game, I didn't know they tried to replicate the palette almost down to a T for the NES. I didn't know they did that. I know that there's a few more colors. I'm not saying they could do this on the Nintendo, but they tried to replicate the palette to such a degree that that's why it feels so familiar. Obviously, it looks a lot better if you put it right next to a Nintendo game. Maybe not a late Nintendo game, but it's the perfect aesthetic for the theme that they're doing here. This is not a game as any game that's looking for the retro view. This is not going to be something that as a spectacle is going to blow your socks off. It's not going to require the highest graphics cards. It's not going to have ray tracing. That's not what this game was trying to do. But if you really think about the fact that they use that Nintendo palette, and they used the same sprite count, and they did all this and built it from the ground up. Now they're using the Wii U, they're using the 3DS, obviously consoles that are much more powerful than the NES could hope to be, but it's still like limiting yourself to that degree, which would inspire creation. It definitely did. Like, this game looks incredible with that consideration, and it's definitely something that makes me feel all warm and fuzzy, makes me an extremely happy retro gamer. I can't complain. Why would I? This looks great no matter how you play it. How about yourself, Shane?
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, we're us old fogies around here are suckers for good, 2D sprite work, and you would be hard pressed to find too many other games that do it as well as Shovel Knight does. All of the animations are super smooth. Everything is real crisp. The almost slavish dedication to replicating that NES aesthetic with the color palette, all of that stuff really does pay off, because, as Chris said, if you are someone that, is familiar with playing those games back in the day, then you're going to feel pretty much right at home here as well. Yeah, I don't know if there's too much more that I can say about just the graphical presentation. I tried to see if I could find some faults with it. I don't think I can. It's real good. It's real good. It looks real pretty and plays real well. And I guess that's another point too, is that it's not necessarily, a demanding game from a hardware perspective at all, but that doesn't always mean something, right? Because like games that look like they shouldn't be demanding sometimes are, for probably the wrong reasons. As much as I love Vampire Survivors, that's a perfect example. But anyway, that definitely can occur. And so it really just comes down to diligence in programming and making sure that you're streamlining everything and making sure you're not getting any memory leaks popping out in places, et cetera, et cetera. And I can't say that there's any point in Shovel Knight where I saw any kind of like frame rate issue or slowdown or anything. Like the whole thing is just buttery smooth.
Are you going to tell us it looks like shit, Dave?
No. God, no, not this game.
Damn it.
This game looks great. It's like you said with the gameplay, Chris, this game looks like you remember those NES games looking like. Especially if it's been a while since you played one, or like looked at a screenshot or something, you might remember them looking like Shovel Knight. But there's a lot of stuff going on here that the NES couldn't do. More colors, more vibrant colors, I would say. The backgrounds definitely stand out as something like they took some liberties with here. But that pixel count and stuff and those limitations that they put on themselves really help set that right type of like visual, I guess, tone to it. Like that, like I said, it looks the way that you remember those other games looking like. And then you have a bunch of fun stuff with the visuals too, like all the enemy designs. The enemy are the designs for the Knights of the Order of No Quarter are all awesome. They all have a bunch of personality from what they say in dialogue when you talk to them, but also how they look. Like, we were talking about shoveling driveways earlier. Polar Knight has a shovel, but it's a snow shovel because he's the Polar Knight. And it's just a bunch of cool little enemy design touches like that. They give personality to your basic skeletons and to like the main characters, the named characters in the game too. And then the only other visual thing that I really want to shout out is when you land the killing blow on a boss, it does this awesome screen shake and like slow down, and the background goes away and you have the solid color background in this slow motion as you hit that final hit on the boss. Often, like for me, I use the pogo as like my main attack in boss fights. So you have this awesome slowdown of you pogoing off a boss's head, and then the boss like flies off. They have their own animations for like their defeated animation or whatever. Shovel Knight bounces off to the other side of the screen. You have this awesome screen shake and stuff. It's like this awesome like feeling like you did it. You beat this boss. Maybe later in the game, like especially the final boss, I thought was pretty difficult. So when you hit that, you get to celebrate it in that moment. And it's a visual presentation decision that they made that absolutely rocks.
I just do want to say, I don't think we talked about the final boss. I love the final boss.
Yeah, it's good.
That's such a good boss fight.
Yeah, and narrative implications in that fight too. Really good.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I don't think we really need to talk much more about that. I do like the fact that you brought up Polar Knight has a shovel. I want to know more about that. That should be a point of contention. There should be some jealousy there. I want a shovel measuring contest.
Oh yeah.
Like they should be arguing whose shovel is bigger, right? I don't know.
Did you see the origin story for why Shovel Knight has a shovel in the first place?
No, I didn't. What is it?
It's so this is from Jason Schreier's book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. There's a whole chapter about the development of Shovel Knight. And like their origins as AAA designers, their choice to go indie, how they came up with all of this, yada, yada, yada. And they were thinking of like, we want to make this game, Zelda 2 type game. We don't want to have a sword. We're tired of swords. So what melee weapon could we have? But it has to be iconic. Like you can't just have like a lead pipe or something like that. It's got to be memorable because they wanted part of their like design for Shovel Knight, specifically the character. They wanted Shovel Knight to be marketable and memorable. The horned helmet and all of that, but also the shovel came because they're like, well, no one's using shovels as a melee weapon. It's kind of funny. It is memorable. Let's go with it. And then they got the, the digging animations and all of that came from that. And then the downward, the thrust, the pogo move, when you can see the shovel down there, that's awesome. That's the origin of it, is they wanted a melee weapon that was not a sword and eventually landed on a shovel. And then we get all of these, talking about shovels. We got the snow shovel with Polar Knight, all of that stuff. Recommend checking that book out if anyone's interested in reading the history of Shovel Knight's development.
Jason Schreier is a great writer.
Yeah.
So I'm illiterate. I do not read. I'm probably like a Zoolander when it comes to my ability to read literature. But I know we have plenty of people who do. So I know Jason Schreier can write really well. So hey.
I think what's funny about that too, one of the very first NPCs you meet in the village makes a comment about that where he's like, hey, we're not allowing people with weapons in village, okay?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, wait, that's a shovel. Whatever, go in.
I don't have a weapon. It's just a shovel. Come on, man. And he's like, yeah, you're all right. Come on in.
You're right. Now, you did say something about trying to be iconic. And I've read the notes. So I'm going to start out with Dave after I do this like horrible segue I'm about to do. We're going to get into the music and sound. So the audio department here. So Dave, what do you think about the audio for Shovel Knight?
Yeah, the soundtrack, Jake Kaufman, not sure how to pronounce it. Never said his name out loud before, except on my own podcast like 2 years ago. But one of the best soundtracks I think I've ever heard. It is wall to wall fantastic. It's another one of those, it sounds like you remember the NES soundtracks. I think there's a couple extra sound channels, but the sound chip is the same, if I remember right. It's great. Every single song, when it boots up, I'm like, I'm back home. Gives you personality for all the levels that you're in. Some of the songs are like these driving, super memorable melodies. And some of them are, some little off rhythm fun stuff in some of the other levels. But the thing that I wrote in the notes, which I will say it and I will take the heat if people want to come after me for it. Strike the Earth, which is the level 1 music, is the first, not the first song you'll hear, but it is the music for the tutorial level, is, in my opinion, as good as the Mario Brothers 1-1 music, as far as setting a tone for the game and being an awesome song in its own right. You are setting off on an adventure to rescue Shield Knight, and the adventure begins with this song, and it pumps you up so much that you have like your little intro, and then when the melody really hits in, the da 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 da, you're like, yes, let's go. So I love this soundtrack. That song, Strike the Earth, is talked about a lot. I think it gets a lot of accolades, and it deserves every single one of them. It is the perfect first level music for getting you ready to play this game.
Shane.
Yo, this music fucks.
Correct.
I could leave it at that, but oh my dude, I still fire this soundtrack up like on the reg just to listen to it. This music is so good. It's so good. I think to Dave's earlier point about it being like what you remember from the NES, I would say again, and even more so than the graphics department, this is what you think you remember, but like 1,000 times better. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some great NES tracks out there, no question. But I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think any of them touch the soundtrack of Shovel Knight. It is just so masterfully composed. And fun fact, in case anybody didn't know this, there were 2 contributions to the soundtrack by Mega Man composer Manami Matsume also. So you've got some pedigree in there. In addition, not that Jake Kaufman doesn't have that, but you got that additional sort of legacy legitimacy, I guess, included that way. And also, again, wild, but this slavish dedication to accuracy, to their, inspirations. The music for this soundtrack was written using the VRC6 sound chip, which actually adds an additional 3 audio channels to the Nintendo Entertainment System. So like, it wasn't like they were just, using some modern, music making software and just tried to make it sound legit. Like they were making it legit. So
is the VRC6, is that what Konami used in Castlevania 3 over in Japan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
It is, as a matter of fact. So yeah, it's real good. I mean, I think I feel like it's the obvious answer, and Dave already pointed this out. Strike the Earth is definitely, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's like top 2 on the soundtrack in a pantheon of songs that are all, in my opinion, absolute bangers. Like, not only are they composed and constructed extremely well, they fit their levels or their areas perfectly to a T. This is how to do chiptune music, y'all. Like, this is real good.
Mm-hmm. Special shout out to the Plague Knight level and the Spectre Knight level for having great music too. And then one thing that they do is they will usually, if not always, I'm paying attention to the boss fights, but they will often, if not always, roll the melody from the level into like the more intense version for the boss fight, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
I mean, it's the Shovel Knight soundtrack. Like, I think that we should be able to, and we can start it here if we want to, start the movement, that we should be able to say that as a shorthand for, like, we don't have to talk about it. It's Michael Bumpus for Top 3 podcast listeners. It's the Shovel Knight soundtrack. It's that good that it carries that weight with it when you say that. It's like saying it's the Super Mario World soundtrack or something like that. It's that good.
I love the Top 3 podcast, and Aaron Engel, I know you're never going to listen to this, but I fucking love you. That's why I'll say this, because you're never going to hear this.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell him either.
Really, yeah, it'll inflate his ego, as you said before.
Yeah.
And I have talked to him. Never meet your heroes. Anyway, I like that. It's the Shovel Knight soundtrack. Fuck yeah, do that. Michael Bumpus of soundtracks. Briefly, before I get into the soundtrack, because we've talked a lot about that, and I'm going to talk about it more here in a second. I just want to get into the sounds. The sounds sound like an NES game. And they sound exactly how you think you remember them, which means they sound better than they actually do. Which, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to complain about them. I think talking about sound design in general, unless it's really bad, is kind of almost a waste of time. It's just good. There you go. I'm not an audiophile enough to specifically talk about just sound design, so I'm not really going to here. That's not what I do. I love talking about the music because the music is what sticks out to me, and this is what this game does. Shovel Knight has like the distinct honor of being the best soundtrack that you have to remind me of is great. Like, if I give you like a top 5, if like this was on a flight, for example, they're like, name your top 5 soundtracks, would I name Shovel Knight? Not inherently, until someone says, what about Shovel Knight? I'm like, fuck, I gotta put it somewhere on here. That's Shovel Knight for me, because it's a brilliant soundtrack. I like King Knight's level the most, by the way. I also love Dance Macabre. Strike the Earth doesn't stick out to me as much as it does with YouTube. It's still, I'm not going to dismiss it whatsoever, but it comes together so well in the way that it expresses the tone of the game. And I think that's a consistent theme I've said a lot with what this game is trying to accomplish. It knew what it wanted to be. If it's using that VRC6 chip in order to make this music, it's just like, holy shit. I wish Jake Kaufman was alive to make music for the mid 80s for the NES and Famicom, because like we got a lot of great music back then, but we could have had more great music, because this is outstanding. Who hates this music? I want to know who hates this music, and then I want a puppy to punch you, because you probably want to kick puppies, and I want that to be a display of great irony, because you are probably a very miserable person. Maybe you're not terrible. You know what? I'll give you that grace, but you're probably very miserable. Maybe I won't have the puppy punch you, but lick you until you give into submission, because you need love in your life. You need to find yourself, because I can't find anyone that would hate the soundtrack inherently. It's that good. It's really that fucking good. It's definitely a top tenor in the very least of all sort of video game soundtracks, at least when you consider the fact for how it matches with the game itself, which I think should rank fairly highly in what you think of how a video game soundtrack should be. It should match with the game, because sometimes, hey, you might listen to a track and be like, oh, this sounds terrible, but it might match with the game. I just don't think that matters either way with Shovel Knight. I'm just trying to find some sort of devil's advocate. I can't find it. Shovel Knight's soundtrack is fantastic, and all of you should love it. If you don't, well, consider your life choices and Who knows?
I mean, I feel like we should stay thematic, and I'll just say, you know what? I'll just send a cloud of propeller rats into your house if that's the case.
I mean, they make you happy. They make me happy.
Yeah, they're fucking adorable.
Yeah.
For the record, I actually agree with you, Chris. I had to dig it up again, no pun intended, because I was trying to remember exactly what it was. That's why I said top 2 with Strike the Earth.
Yeah.
In the Halls of the Usurper is my favorite, definitely.
Ah, such a good track. Oh man, are we giving this game enough of a sloppy toppy with a tongue bath here? I think this is. I don't know why I said that. Let's divert away because Ashton figured this out. I don't think that worked at all. Right, time to get into our patron pontifications. What are our patron pontifications, you may ask, if you are new to the show? Well, we give the opportunity to all of our patrons over on Patreon to give their opinions on our game of the episode, Game du Jour. And we do that through our Discord. So if you're interested to share your thoughts on an upcoming game, go over to our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Sign up there. Join our Discord, which is free to everybody, by the way. You do not have to be a patron in order to get on our Discord. And then once you see the notification over in the patron notifications, give your thoughts and we will read it here. And you know what? This is starting out with Lyle and it mentions you. So how about you read this one, Shane?
Oh, okay. Well, yes. So we are starting out with the patron saint Lyle, who says, "The night what shovels? I picked this game up specifically because Shane sang its praises. While I haven't finished it, I have greatly enjoyed the time I have spent with it. It just feels good. Praise Gorp, etc. Smooches."
Thank you, Lyle. I miss your tyranny.
Do you, though? Really? I mean, I guess it did give us, that Buffy the Vampire Slayer Game Boy game, so I guess we got something out of it.
I like me some tasteful side boob.
Indeed.
All right. Next is Keith of the somehow still breathing Maiden Quest podcast. I thought it was dead, but I keep seeing new episodes. Go check out the remnants of the Main Quest podcast. You might be getting a new episode soon. Keith says, "I played Shovel Knight for about 5 minutes. Seems like the rest of it might have been fun." Why, thank you, Keith.
We'll take that as a win. Yeah.
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 I appreciate your deep insights.
Our resident contrarian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Next up is Nomad from the Retro Wildlands podcast. Go check that out. Nomad's a good dude. Shovel Knight is an amazing love letter to not just side-scrolling platformers in general, but all those that came before it. Games such as DuckTales, Super Mario 3, and Castlevania 3, for instance, contributed bits of themselves to help make Shovel Knight a must-play. Not only that, the soundtrack by Jake Kaufman is one of my favorites, and I listen to it constantly today. If you've never played this game before, you need to give it a try. Do it for yourself, do it for your fellow man, but most importantly, do it for chivalry. Da-da-da-da.
Love it.
Oh, man. Also, stepping back one real quick, he may slap me over the internet for this one. I don't know. I'm not gonna spoil too much, but the Main Quest podcast does in fact live on for at least a little while longer, because somebody may be showing up over there sometime in the near future. So, yeah. Anyway, moving right along on our pontifications. Next up, we have Matt, aka Stormageddon of the Fun and Games and Reignite podcast, who says, "Shovel Knight, to this day, remains one of my favorite games of all time and easily my favorite indie game. One of the all-timer best soundtracks by Jake Kaufman, the best platforming and combat in an action side-scrolling platformer, and a great but simple story that only grows in depth with each additional campaign. Also, the world design and writing are top-notch. Secured Yacht Club as one of my fave developers, and I cannot wait for their next game, Mina the Hollower." Oh shit, I forgot about that. That's right.
I backed that one. I'm waiting for it too.
Yeah. Shovel Knight is basically a near perfect game. Well, you know what? I think I tend to agree. Thank you, Matt.
Next is Omi, who doesn't have a podcast, but you can hear them on our... Yeah. You could hear him on our Gauntlet Legends episode, and I highly recommend you go listen to that. Omi's a fantastic dude. And Omi says, Shovel Knight is the most important thing to have happened to indie gaming. Not because it's a well-crafted and amazing experience, which it is, but because it got the ball rolling on the idea that very small teams could use the crowdfunding site Kickstarter to fund their game projects. They even laid out guidelines for other indies to help them succeed in doing so. Thank you, Omi, and I do know Omi is working on an indie game himself. Looking forward to that, Omi. Really looking forward to playing that someday.
Hell yeah. Next up is Lunchbox, aka the Disgruntled Gamer, aka Thunderdome Gaming Society on YouTube. Says, Shovel Knight brings indie games forward with a modern retro vibe, and it's glorious. I'll say this, indie games continue to innovate and be more creative than AAA trendy and pandering bullshit. Look at what most people are playing these days, indie games. Shovel Knight is a great experience, and I'm sure anyone will enjoy playing it. Hear, hear.
All right, next up we've got The Emperor, who says, I am on my 4th playthrough of Shovel Knight. The game is timeless and will forever be one of the best platform games out there. Thank you, Emperor.
Thank you. All right, next is Raging Demon, our resident fighting expert from the Command List podcast. That command is with a K, like Mortal Kombat. Raging Demon says, I consider 2D platformers one of my favorite genres, and Shovel Knight sure is one of those. The Shovel Knight part of Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, there you go, is absolutely fascinating. I love hearing about stories like this. I highly recommend everyone play and buy Shovel Knight multiple times. Apparently, Yacht Club Games have a big-ass statue of Shovel Knight in their lobby. Frankly, we should all have giant statues of Shovel Knight in our homes, schools, and places of worship. Oh, and P.S., Mario is trash compared to Shovel Knight. Thank you, Raging Demon. I don't know if I...
Just throwing those hot takes right at the end there.
I don't know if I quite agree with the whole of that assessment, but I do appreciate your pontification here today.
I appreciate it too.
I mean, listen, I'm just saying, if we pulled a King of Games and you asked me if you sat down and you put Super Mario Brothers or Shovel Knight in front of me and said, which one would you rather play? I would say Shovel Knight like 10 times out of 10. That's all I'm saying. That's
only one category. Which would you rather play today? I mean, if Super Mario World, Shovel Knight.
Does Mario have a shovel? I don't think so. Just
yeah,
saying.
I guess advantage Shovel Knight right there.
Yeah.
I would say that. Yeah, absolutely.
Next up is Disc Chimera from the Game Over Hell YouTube channel. Please go check that out. Good stuff. Shovel Knight is the first indie game I played that was heavily advertised as being inspired by a number of NES-era games and actually did more than just be, say, quote, just like Mega Man, end quote. By which I mean I owned a Wii in the PS360 generation, so yes, I missed out on every indie game that was released on Live Arcade and such. The titular character was the mascot you want to put as a cameo in your game if you were an up-and-coming indie team of developers, because Shovel Knight carried the torch after Super Meat Boy passed it to him. I came across the game because a friend was a huge fan and made me and my brother play the game for a lengthy evening, which turned into the morning after. Sounds fun. While I enjoy the experience of hot-swapping controllers in one-player games, I didn't really notice how incredibly put together the game is until I replayed it for the Retro Hangover Review Crew. And for my own show.
Echo.
Yes, you can easily see the Mega Man and DuckTales influence, but the game borrows from them, comes up with its own solutions on top of it, and adds a level of accessibility that doesn't get in the way of players who would rather dismiss that. It builds a whole cohesive world in spite of how little text it features, and the soundtrack is just superb 8-bit style chiptune, one of the best examples of that type of game music. This game gets nothing but praise from critics, reviewers, and dedicated game fans for a reason. And I swear there's nothing overrated about it. Every classic gaming fan needs to play it, unless they hate platformers.
I think if you even hate platformers and you hate this game, you may not have a soul. But those people do exist, so understandable.
I hate jumping so much.
I'm glad that Dave put in his comment there. It'll just overshadow what I said. Anyway, moving on. The last pontification that we've got on the list today, but certainly by no means the least, we have the one and only Alt, who says Shovel Knight is a love letter to the good NES games in a modern package. I have to still play King Knight, but Plague and Spectre Knight bonus modes are great additions to an already excellent title. This was the first Kickstarter game I played, and it felt like it took them a decade to get all the side goals done, much like Bloodstained. I'd love to see Shovel Knight 2 or Shovel Knight X down the road.
I don't know if I want to see Shovel Knight X, but I'm sure it would be great. I don't think it needs a Shovel Knight X. I don't think we need that. It would still be fine. Why am I guess it'd be fine. All right. We're going to go. Thank you all of our patrons for contributing your thoughts on or your pontifications, as we title it. We are going to go now into whether or not this game holds up today. So I'm going to start this out because I think I'm going to be relatively brief. And we did this back in December for the Retro Hangover review crew. So it wasn't that long ago that I got to play all the way through it and play it completely. And if you go back and into our Discord, which again is free, just go into our link tree and you can just click on that. You can just join the Discord and become part of the conversation. I give it a 10 out of 10, and I stand by that. It's a 10 out of 10 game. It still is a 10 out of 10 game, and I don't foresee it ever not being a 10 out of 10 game. You like NES games? Yeah, go for it. You like retro games? Yeah, go for it. And if you're listening to this, you probably like retro games. So, yeah, like, it's right up your alley. I know we didn't talk about any of the additional content that was brought up in Treasure Trove. We didn't really get to that. Dave did bring that up earlier, that we were mostly going to exclusively focus on Shovel of Hope.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did. But there's so much additional content on top of that. And if you just focus on Shovel of Hope, that's still a 10 out of 10 experience. It's one of the best games released in the past, God, ever. So go play Shovel Knight. It's brilliant. You owe it to yourself to do this. If you love video games, if you love having fun, if at any time in your life the words "I am a gamer" came out of your mouth, then you're going to like Shovel Knight. 100% it holds up today. No question. Shane?
You know what? I think the question is irrelevant because I don't need to ask whether or not the game still holds up today, because Shovel Knight never left, baby. It's still good. It's always been good, and it's going to continue to be good. Like this game is one of the ones that, in my opinion, I think is going to be timeless. I think, assuming the sun doesn't explode or we blow ourselves up or the AI eventually takes over,
likely.
I don't see. Yeah, well, I don't see. Well, you know what? Then the AI will play Shovel Knight with you. It'll be fine. Anyway, I don't see this game ever not being relevant, not ever not being something that I would 100% without hesitation recommend somebody plays. The aesthetic that they went with the pixel art, as we've said countless times on the show, has such a longevity to it when done well, and this game certainly has done that well, that it's never going to look dated. Like ever. It's always going to be something that you could pick up and be like, oh yeah, no, this feels right. This feels good. This looks good. So yes, it absolutely is still 100% playable today, and it always will be. And if you like games at all, you should at least give it a try if you haven't already.
All right. So Dave, floor is yours. You got the final word.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up at all. It's
well, shit.
Yeah, no, sorry to say. Yeah, it doesn't.
He was playing the long con this whole time.
No, it doesn't hold up because that, like Shane said, that question is irrelevant for this game. For something to have held up, I feel like there needs to be something that might feel outdated about it or feel old about it. But despite Shovel Knight turning 10 years old and being eligible to be on the illustrious Retro Hangover podcast here, there's nothing that feels old or outdated at all about this game. This game could have come out yesterday. It would still feel the same. So in the Retro Hangover review crew, I also gave this a 10 out of 10. And it was like, I played through the game to like refamiliarize myself and see if I have any new critiques this time around on what is like my 6th or 7th playthrough of all of the various campaigns. I don't have anything. This is a 10 out of 10 game. There's nothing that this game tries to do that they don't excel at, which is why, like Matt said in the pontifications, I can't wait for Mina the Hollower because they're taking on a different set of influences, but I know that they have the right mindset with how they go about making these things. As game development tools become more accessible and as people who grew up playing those older games, we're seeing it now with like people who very obviously grew up playing PlayStation 1 and N64 games are now old enough and skilled enough to make their own games with those influences. We're going to keep seeing that with people making these retro callback games. And I think Shovel Knight just takes like the perfect philosophy to it. They keep some degree of authenticity to like how those older games were made, whether you're talking about the technology they used to make it, to write the music, or the limitations for the visuals, or the gameplay mechanics that they take from the other things. But they're not married to the past in a way that would hurt their product now. They made, it seems like to me, they made every right choice. Every choice they could have made was the right one. There's a couple things that like, I don't break the checkpoints. I've never talked to anyone who breaks the checkpoints. That's a speedrunner thing, I think. But like, that's like number 100 on the bullet point list of things to talk about with Shovel Knight. So if that's the one choice they didn't nail, whatever, So yeah, it's, if someone came up to me on the street and was like, hey, does Shovel Knight hold up? I would laugh out loud at like what kind of question is that? Shovel Knight fucking rules. It's a 10 out of 10. You
absolute buffoon.
Yeah.
Absurd.
Come back when you have a real question. Yeah.
What's your favorite track on the OST? That's the real question.
That's a better question. Yeah.
That is a better question.
Yeah.
That makes you think a little bit more.
Yeah. And as we went through this episode and I started thinking about platformers, because I don't really like a lot of the games that inspired this game. I don't love Mega Man. I hate Zelda too. And, Mario, I respect Mario. I don't like playing Mario games. I think this might be my favorite platformer of all time, especially 2D platformers. Like, I'm going off the dome here, but I would feel pretty confident that this is probably my favorite one. You want to throw 3D platformers in, maybe we have a different conversation. But yeah, this game rules. Absolutely rules.
Awesome. Just so everyone knows, I'm not alone on this. What's your feelings on Mario 3?
Can't stand it. I think it's mean.
Thank you, Dad.
You are not the only one. All right, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of our show today. Thank you, Dave, so much for showing up. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. You're on, like I said, King of Games 96 too. So if people want to continue to hear your voice there and the way you present your opinions on the games, it's all there. But thank you so much, man. Thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks so much again for having me back. It's an honor to come on here and talk with the both of you. I feel like we have good conversations on all the episodes we do. So I'm always happy to come back.
Yeah, always happy to have you too. And after I just thanked Dave so much for being on the show, you might be wondering, where is Dave from? I know we've said that several times at the beginning of this episode. We haven't said it enough, I think, in the duration in between. No, who could say it better than Dave himself?
That's such a weird way to phrase that.
What do you mean?
Dave,
maybe you should say it
where
then.
Are you from? Show me your papers.
Dave, where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm the host of the...
Yeah, where can we find you, Dave?
I am the host of the Tales from the Backlog podcast. It is a Backlog Games review, a deep dive discussion podcast. Not necessarily retro games, do retros from time to time. I always kind of joke my sweet spot on the shows like 2014 with Shovel Knight up through like 2019, stuff like that. So Tales from the Backlog is the show. Every episode's a deep dive on one game in particular with no spoilers for a while. And then we do a hard spoiler break. We warn you when spoilers are coming. And then after that, full spoiler discussion. So if you didn't play that game, you can jump out at that break and you will not be spoiled on the story. and a good episode to shout out. Number one, because it showcases that spoiler break, but also because it has Chris and Shane on it, is the episode about Signalis that we did, which was kind of torture to not spoil for a while, but we did it.
Yeah.
Chris has also been on the show. We talked about Spec Ops: The Line, another torturous one to talk about with no spoilers for a while, but we got there and then had a great spoiler discussion. And then we just talked about Mario 3. So there was an episode Chris was on the podcast this year for, where we talked about our approach to evaluating retro games so far in the future after they came out, and especially with games like on the NES. Are we able to put ourselves in the context of the time? Are we looking at it from a modern point of view? We had two other guests. We had Rick from Pixel Project Radio, and we had Andre from Fine Time on that episode. So it's a big roundtable discussion about the lens we evaluate retro games through. And I think that was a really productive and awesome conversation too. So lots of places to go check that out on Tales from the Backlog. Real quick, my other podcast is called A Top 3 Podcast. It is a much simpler pitch. We do top 3 lists and we draft topics. Chris was on an episode of Top 3. I forget the letter. Was it T that we drafted? T. So
definitely T.
We drafted words that start with the letter T. And if that sounds weird and silly, it's because it was, and it was a good time. So that is called A Top 3 Podcast.
Thank you so much for pitching your show and choosing the episodes that we happen to be on. But
of course.
But even if we're not on there, Tales from the Backlog is high quality, no matter what episode you choose to start at. And same with the Top 3 Podcast. I'm a big fan of both. So make sure you go check that out. Also, he mentioned Pixel Project Radio. Big fan of Pixel Project Radio over there with Rick Firestone. Fantastic. And Fine Time with Dre. Dre is a mind and a talent. So make sure you go check out Fine Time. You'll have a fine time with Fine Time.
Yes, sir.
Shane, how about you carry us on out? Let the listeners know the boilerplate spiel about where they can find us and all of our fantastic things.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for teeing that one up and giving people enough time to turn off the episode. If you're still here, then, maybe I don't know, you're probably a glutton for punishment, I guess. Or maybe this is your first time and you don't know what you're in for, in which case, hi, welcome, or we're glad that you're here. And we hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, I have got news for you. And that is, we have so much more for you to go and listen to. You can find our entire backlog of episodes, as well as some other fun things like our Patreon, if you'd like to support the show in a monetary fashion, which also, by the way, gives you access to a completely other giant burgeoning pile of additional content. So if you don't get enough from the main show feed, you are not done. There's plenty more there. And for as little as $1, you can get access to it. So consider that if that sounds at all enticing. We also have our merch store and our socials, as well as our YouTube channel where we post video versions of all these episodes, as well as the VODs from our Twitch streams over on our Twitch channel. And all of these things can be found in one convenient place, and that is our link tree, the thing that apparently old people use, as told to us by someone at some point, and that's still sticking in my craw, and it's probably going to, and because I use the phrase stick in my craw, I think I just proved them right. Anyway,
that's the third time you said it.
Yeah, thank you. The Linktree /retro hangover. That is the place to go, the place to be. linktr.ee/retro hangover, and you will find all of those things right there. And it's, speaking of the boilerplate obligatory things, I don't know how this happened, but we're just rolling with it now. Chris, the Twitch, tell them about the streams.
The funny thing about my sections when I talk about twitch.tv/retro hangovers, they're never boilerplate. I usually shit over the streams, which you shouldn't do because you want people to come over and watch them. And you can find that at twitch.tv/retro hangover at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Sundays. Or not. But you know what? Are you really doing anything better on a Sunday night other than going over to twitch.tv/retro hangover and hanging out with two middle-aged men at 9 p.m. Eastern time?
You're really selling.
I mean,
go there.
we certainly don't have anything better to do, obviously.
Let's go.
Let's go. Just hang. Great people. There's great people there. Just trust me. It's a good time. We'll be playing a video game. Shane, help me out and just like end the episode and kill me.
All right, cool. Let's put the spade in the ground on this one and say that with all of that now having been said, until next time,
Play with your 4 chivalry joysticks.
Shane here with a quick message. You know, the one rule Chris and I have always gone by regarding advertisements is this. It has to be something we use and can personally vouch for. If you know me, you know I love coffee. And Bones Coffee Company has been my go-to for home brewing for quite some time now. Their small batch beans come in an impressive variety of flavors like Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space, or Electric Unicorn, which I swear tastes exactly like Fruity Pebbles. And the best part? No added sugar or calories involved, just natural flavors infused right into the beans themselves. Build your own sample pack of 5 4-ounce bags to find out which flavors speak to you, or jump in head first with full 12-ounce bags. They've even got K-Cups. Step up your homebrew game with Bones Coffee by visiting bit.ly/RHPBones. That's bit.ly/RHPBONES.